Hi everybody, I'm Dr. Mack and I want to welcome you to this webinar, The 4 Essential Keys to Parenting Strong-Willed Kids. You know, we've got folks here from coast to coast and around the world, and some of you are even up in the middle of the night, so thanks for stopping in. The format today is that I'm going to cover a whole bunch of concepts and tips and tools with you. Then I'm going to share some resources that can give you even more help for your particular situation. Then we'll have a Q&A session, and as an extra treat for all of you who stay till the end, I'll be giving you 2 albums of award-winning kids songs that can be a wonderful complement to your efforts. You know, I only wish I could see all your smiling faces, because gathered here today we truly are a tribe with common purpose to create greater harmony in our families. So I'm glad I found you. And I'm not sure how you found me. Maybe you Googled me online, or maybe you heard about this program by word of mouth. But in any case, thanks for coming. You know, parents from all walks of life have a similar story. Great expectations when their kids are first born, and maybe you too hope that you'd always have fun as a family, your kids would be happy, and everything would be smooth and harmonious, right? You know, like those Hallmark cards where you have really special moments of connection. But perhaps instead, maybe some of the time or too much of the time, it's looking and feeling more like this, or this, or this. So let me throw a question at you. What are your primary concerns with your child? Is it problems with listening, or meltdowns, or aggression, or all of the above? You know, I saw a mom in therapy last week who was so embarrassed to admit to me that her 4-year-old daughter was so out of control that this mom couldn't take her shopping with her. So she had to hire a babysitter when she wanted to go to the grocery store. And this mom wasn't rich by any means. Anyway, what I hear from parents all the time is that they're feeling really exhausted and upset and defeated. It may not always be stressful in your home. You might even have lots of moments when you're having fun with your kids and things are cool, but maybe for far too much of the time there's a lot of upset happening. Your child just isn't listening enough. You've tried a bunch of approaches, maybe read some books, Googled some things, done a little bit of this and that, but despite your best efforts, it's not working. So you're looking for help. And it can be so frustrating that things aren't getting better. Another case, I heard from a dad the other day, totally stressed out, and he said that his 9-year-old son acted like a little king, just full of constant commands. Mommy, do this, do that. Get me a glass of milk, Daddy. And how frustrating it was for them, these parents, to try to get their child to do anything like listen or help out. Or here's a cute little scenario. I hope it's okay to throw a little sense of humor into the situation, so check this out. Say, was that lightning that just hit the Johnson's house? Nah, it's actually a bunch of tension and sparks coming out of the house. You know, it's just that evening battle going on. Their younger son's refusing to brush his teeth again. Oh well. Does this dance sound familiar? So check out this fun little entertainment. Step up, ladies and gentlemen. Here's what I call the parenting dance of despair. You know, it's almost inevitable to be at your wit's end when your kids won't listen because they just don't feel like it. And it triggers all kinds of feelings, and you might even be having some thoughts, or you feel embarrassed to share, but parents feel this lots of times, and it goes something like this. What do you mean? I bust my butt all day to be sweet to you. I work hard, feed you, love you, give you tons of stuff and care and kindness, and you're going to say no to me when I ask you to put your shoes on when we have to leave? Give me a break. So the real question that we're facing here is, how do we turn this dance into this or this? So what's been going on in your family? From what's been going on, maybe you not even believe that it's possible to change your situation, but if you hang in there with me, you'll see that there's some hope around the corner. Your job is to roll up your sleeves, learn some new concepts, and if you have a partner, it's essential to create a working team together. You two can learn how to bring out the best in your kids, and all it takes is gathering some new tools, like this cool looking alien here, and then following through for it to work. So now I just want to take a moment to introduce myself. This lovely lady that you see here is my wife and partner of 35 years, and in that same time span, we've co-directed a place called the Family Therapy Institute of Santa Barbara. Here's a quick picture of the office where we work, and we're so grateful to have a team of 14 therapists that are under our direction. So in conjunction with this, we looked into tons of research about families. And the good news is that there's a lot of information out there about how to parent most effectively and set limits with kids in really caring and constructive ways and create healthy long-term relationships. Our first book is a practical guidebook not only for families wanting help, but also for clinicians helping families. So what are the elements of success in families? Well, what we've discovered and uncovered are obvious things like communication, conflict resolution, positive thinking, and yes, that parents have the ability to set limits with their kids in loving ways. The fact is that in healthy families, there really are two important areas of focus. On one hand, there's an incredible amount of love and warmth, but on the other hand, firmness and structure. And what we know is that kids thrive under these conditions. Our second book evolved out of the fact that for decades now I've specialized in the treatment of kids and families of kids in the 2 to 12 age range. And local pediatricians started referring to me as the child whisperer because I've had over 1,000 successful cases of kids with distraught and frustrated parents looking for solutions. And to be honest, I've felt a responsibility to deliver tools that really work using a win-win approach that's not only effective, but that parents and kids really like and respond to. So that's been my primary mission for decades now. Many of you might also know that I'm a professional kids songwriter for TV and numerous other projects, and here's a glimpse of some of the award-winning albums you'll receive if you stay till the end of our time together. Okay, so parallel to my clinical work and study of families, I've also had a really strong interest in the applications of the latest brain research to parenting. And I'm sure you realize that this is a silly representation of the brain. Here's what it really looks like. Yet other people would argue that this is a more accurate snapshot of a parent's brain. You see, here's that huge worry center at the top, and over here you've got the fear of losing the babysitter. You know, a huge stress for families these days is what I call the balancing act. Trying to hold down a job, be an effective parent, try to still be a couple if you're in a relationship, and balance all these things together. And if you're like most parents, you're juggling tons of things in your life and don't necessarily have the time for a bunch of fluff. So let's jump right in. I've broken down the points of this presentation into some essentials, and there are 4 keys for you to consider that can help you unlock the change that you're looking for. First, we'll focus on understanding who strong-willed kids are. They're really unique and very special, but as you well know, they can also be challenging and stubborn. A second key is going to focus on handling family feelings. And in order to turn things around, it's really important to lower levels of anger and deal with emotional upsets in healthy and constructive ways. So I'll be sharing some of the latest brain research that has important implications for preventing and breaking negative cycles of how you get along with your child. Key number 3 is about creating a caring climate and positive atmosphere and learning how to help your child save face instead of backing him into a corner. Key number 4 focuses on providing a container for kids' behaviors and feelings, and not just for your own good as a parent, but to help them feel less anxious and better about themselves. One last thing before we start. Tons of people have given me feedback that they've gotten the most out of this webinar by taking notes to refer back to later. So if you're up for it, I invite you to do so. And I've got a special little quiz for you. I'd like you to write down your best guess about the following question. What do you think is the one question that's so important that I always ask parents about it in the first session? the very first session. It's a pretty simple thing to change that can make a big difference. So jot something down. Give me your guess. What do you think it is? I'll give you the answer later on. All right, so let's launch into key number 1, knowing their nature. So there's a number of things that are very special about kids who are strong-willed, and we'll get to that in a moment. But there's also a bunch of upsetting characteristics. So would you or others describe your child as defiant or spoiled or entitled or any of this list here? What would you say? And if the answer is yes, then welcome to the club. You're not alone. There are literally millions of parents who struggle with the same kinds of challenges. Related to this is a serious question that parents ask, and it's about how their son or daughter might have been labeled by pediatricians or school people as having ODD, or oppositional defiant disorder. This label can be really disturbing because nobody wants to hear that their kid has something that sounds like an illness. It makes you feel hopeless, you know? So the real problem with this oppositional defiant disorder thing is that people make an assumption. There's an implication that the kid has something inside of them that's wrong with them. Maybe they were born this way, just like the color of their eyes, or it's their temperament. Or maybe if they're labeled like this, they're really unfixable. Or maybe we should consider medication. Some folks try to put their child in individual play therapy to see if that'll help. But all of these things sort of seem to miss the point. One glance at this scene and you'll see just one really important way to explain what might be happening with a kid. We'll get into more explanations later. So what I want to share with you is this little analogy. Here's a picture of your happy, healthy little goldfish, right? But what if instead it started looking more like this? And take another step with me and imagine that I'm a goldfish expert and you bring your fish to me and you say, "Is something wrong with this fish? What can we do?" So, brilliant fish expert as I am, not really, I might just pick up the fish bowl and take a whiff of the water and, whoa, hey, I'm sorry, it sort of smells. Of course, the goldfish doesn't have a chance because of the context in which it's swimming. In this case, it's the water in the bowl. Maybe before we label the fish with an illness, we should first change the water in the bowl. Let's fix the context for this goldfish and see if we can bring out the best in him. Now, the goldfish might have a problem that's more internal and even apart from the water, a disease or something, but I can tell you that the first and most important thing to do is change the water in the bowl. That's what I do as a therapist with kids who are out of control. I say to parents, hey, let's just give this situation our best shot at providing the healthiest environment possible for your child and see how things go. Maybe your child needs more help than anything that I can provide, but let's wait and see. Hold off on the labels because I see kids all the time who've been labeled like this, but then change significantly for the better in a matter of just a couple of weeks. I see this all the time with the program I've developed. So if you don't mind, let's hold off on the meds. Let's even hold off on interventions into the school if your kid's having struggles there, because this program that you can implement at home is highly likely to impact your child's behavior in school as well. Now let's make a shift back. Remember that list of challenging attributes we saw before? Well, on the flip side of the coin, there really are a number of positive things, very positive things about strong-willed kids. How about the fact that they're decisive and determined and persistent and gutsy? And you can read the rest of this list. But the question then is, well, then how do we celebrate and enhance the good stuff while it's at the same time trying to handle the challenging situations or circumstances? So I showed you our picture of our building before, but just so you can get a feel, here's a shot of my office with me playing a therapeutic board game with an 8-year-old girl. But I want to tell you a story about a different kid, Nathan. He was about to be kicked out of school for biting his teacher, and no surprise, he was also pretty disobedient with his parents, even in the first session I had with them. So after sitting on the floor and spending lots of time with him and his parents were just trying to talk to me, and Nathan flipped out and all hell broke loose. You see those books on the shelf of the bookcase? Well, first he tore into them, and then when his father tried to settle him down, he karate kicked the clipboard that his dad was writing on. So, I don't know, maybe things are better in your situation, maybe worse, but the important thing is that no matter what level of upset is happening in your family, the principles and practices I'll share still apply. For Nathan, it took 5 sessions to turn things around. But it begs the question, what's up with Nathan? What's the key? So people are always asking me, what's the cause and what's the solution to this problem with my child? What is the missing piece of the puzzle that explains why my kid isn't listening to me? But the truth is that there's really and rarely just one cause of defiance in kids, one explanation or one solution. A way more accurate picture is that there are numerous pieces of the puzzle of what's causing things and also how to fix it. My challenge to you then is to figure out all of the many pieces of the puzzle that can help you explain how your child might be struggling. What's the water that your little goldfish is swimming in? So now let's turn our attention to another question. What are some of the factors that make kids so challenging and not listening in the first place? So one that we'll start with is that kids act out because they're showing their parents that they're really upset and don't have any better ways of expressing their feelings. A second one is that kids are just testing to see what they can get away with. It's especially true for boys, but girls too, lots of girls. They just seem to be born to test limits and try to make the world behave as they want. Thank you very much. Testing, 1, 2, 3. I need you to help me control my impulses, please. Another factor is just plain old opposition. Here's a good example in this cartoon that says, I would be happy, but that would make my parents happy. So how does that fit with your situation? Well, one of the hallmarks of kids in the 3 to 10-year-old age range is that they're actively differentiating from their parents, creating distance, largely out of the fact that they're forming their identities apart from their family. Another reason why kids can be defiant is that they can't handle frustration. It's hard to be patient and wait for things. Relevant to this is what we now know about brain development, because even though kids' emotional brains are wired up and raring to go at birth, the prefrontal cortex, what we call the thinking brain, isn't really wired up for girls until they're 25 years old, and oops, it's 28 years old for boys. That's why kids need adults to be sort of the auxiliary hard drives for them. Yet another reason that kids act out is to get their parents' attention. It's really true that for younger kids, adult attention is one of the most powerful influences. If kids can't get some attention in positive ways, they're going to seek it. They're going to seek that attention in negative ways. And we'll focus more on this when we're discussing key number 3. Kids can also be really stubborn and strong-willed because they're retaliating for feeling like they've been mistreated. Some just withdraw, and that's their way of expressing their upset. I had a kid in the first session yesterday who became really withdrawn because he was mad at his dad. The dad was also his soccer coach. It's not always a good situation. But fortunately, this dad readily admitted that he could be too hard on his son, and that insight was a really good start. Another reason why kids can be defiant has to do with the fact that they're expressing anger or they're upset about things that are going on in their lives, either in the family or outside of the family. And then I'd like to remind you again about that image of the goldfish bowl. It's really common for kids to develop behavior problems in order to distract their parents from their marital conflict. Kids can be the barometer of pain in the family and can sacrifice themselves by drawing attention to their behavior and away from their parents' struggles. In our book, Who's the Boss?, we illustrated this point about all these factors, showing sections in a pie chart that describe a number of factors that we focused on to help one kid who is highly defiant. And when all was said and done and we look back at this case, we figured that A whopping 30% of this kid's problems were caused by marital conflict. But he was also upset about sharing attention with his new baby brother. And he was also really angry at his dad and retaliating for being yelled at so much. And finally, it was the fact with this child that he'd often gotten ignored when he was behaving well, but got tons of attention when he was defiant. By the way, this child responded really well to our program, and his mom wrote an unsolicited letter telling how my expertise was truly life-changing for the family. And, I wrote her back and I said, thanks, but honestly, it's not about me. Really, it's the concepts and the tools that deserve the credit. So just to review this first key, knowing your child's nature is really to know all of the many influences that shape them into becoming who they are. It's true, it's so important to view ourselves and others by factoring in the context of our relationships, and whether by our interactions we're bringing out the best or worst in others. That's really the issue. The second key we're going to focus on now is handling family feelings. We'll talk about the use of empathy in a bit, but first I'd like to focus on reducing anger and conflict. So in order to turn things around, it's really essential to deal with emotional upsets in healthy and constructive ways. This is where we're going to draw from some of the latest brain research that has implications for breaking negative patterns of communication. So in my experience, the most common parenting pattern that's not so helpful is raising your voice or yelling at your child. Most of the time this can get kind of ugly. I had a kid in treatment who was both strong-willed and had high anxiety related to his anger at his dad. No surprise, this dad himself had been yelled at and physically punished throughout his childhood and the dad couldn't control this pent-up old anger in dealing with his son. This is a good example of how feelings can get bottled up from childhood, and then when the going gets tough, we take it out, it spills out on our own children. So as I promised, I'm going to share a little with you about new understandings from brain research and how they may apply to your situation. And as you can see in this diagram, the seat of the emotional brain is called the amygdala. So this little structure is pretty small. It's about the size and shape of an almond, but it has huge importance. It's how our brains can get overwhelmed with emotion and lead us to interactions that don't work so well. And there's one word you want to think about when you think about this amygdala, and that word is fear. The amygdala controls the way we react to things that we think are dangerous. So this amygdala thing allowed our species to survive because it kicks in a whole set of physiological responses. In situations where we're feeling attacked by an animal or other person, the whole fight or flight response takes place by flooding our bodies with adrenaline and cortisol. So if you want to respond effectively to a child who's out of control or acting in a stubborn manner, obviously part of the solution is to keep your cool. When the going gets really tough and you're in conflict with your child, your brain fires up and so does theirs, and then it turns into that downward spiral. And we don't have time to discuss today all of the methods right now about how to most effectively lower your negative emotions, but just know that this is essential to effective parenting, and especially with kids who are ADD, I might mention. Just realize that when you use anger to discipline a kid who's strong-willed, it's like pouring gasoline on a fire. Parents of a 3-year-old told me that after the first week of implementing my full program, their child had behavior that improved by 70% in 1 week. But what was most interesting is that the kid said to me in a subsequent session, "Dr. Mack, when they yelled at me, I tried to be brave." So in his own 3-year-old way, he was talking about how reactive he had been to their parenting style. By the way, I feel so blessed to have this kind of bird's eye view of what's going on in kids' hearts and minds. So this little cartoon speaks for itself. Here's what we're trying to avoid. Your son is clearly a prodigy, Mrs. Lipkin. He's already resenting you and your husband at a 10th grade level. So given the nature of our brains, another really essential element of effective parenting is to use empathy. That amygdala we just talked about really settles down when we feel understood by someone else. So using empathy can make a big difference in your child's ability to listen to you. By the way, if you're watching this little video with your partner, give them a playful little pinch, because this also applies to couples. But here's an example with kids. Say, girls, I know that you'd really like to finish your game because you're having so much fun, but it really is time to go to bed now. I'm sorry if this is so frustrating for you to end it now. The bottom line with all this is that our emotional brains need settling in order for us to do what makes sense, to follow directions, and to not act in reactive ways. That's where that empathy piece comes in. I'll tell you a story about one family that sure needed to learn about this feelings thing. I got a call from a mom asking me if I treated kids who were cruel to animals, and I said, sure, okay, what's up? She explained on the phone to me that just that day her son had put their parakeet into the microwave. Well, fortunately for the little bird, she walked into the kitchen just as her son was punching the buttons to turn the microwave on. And so I met with them, and in the first session found out that all three of the kids had become more stubborn and irritable. And when I asked about when the symptoms started, she shared with me that they had just found out that they were moving to Bakersfield. Now, don't get me wrong, this isn't a bad rap about Bakersfield. What was missing from the picture was the mom's ability to deal with the kids' feelings. Had she talked to them about their feelings, about the move? No. So after the kids shared their sadness and fears about leaving their friends and school and everything that was familiar to them, that's what really helped. I hope it saved the parakeet too. I think it did. This feelings issue, though, is so important that I've dedicated a whole module to it in my 7-module course. Okay, moving right along. Key number 3. It's what we call creating a caring climate in the family. But before I get into the things that you might want to do, first I want to cover some patterns you want to avoid. We've already talked about the problems created by getting angry at kids and raising your voice, but equally common, not so great strategies include lecturing kids or repeating yourself over and over. So here's an example of that lecturing thing. Lots of parents don't know it, but long lectures can be filled with their own emotion and frustration, so kids won't really listen for that reason. Remember that amygdala? Well, kids get into that stubborn, defiant, I'm being attacked kind of mode. Their little brains are offline, so you might want to try to save the lessons and conversations when things have cooled down. When a behavior is happening for the first or second time, it really does make sense to explain things to a child and make sure they understand what's up about the rules and reasons for things. But if you find yourself falling into the trap of lecturing a lot as a pattern, you might want to save your breath. A second trap that you may want to avoid is having to repeat yourself. So with repeating, you're just teaching kids they don't really need to respond until the 7th time you've asked them to do something instead of the first time. If you continue to prompt your child, they're also never going to learn to remember things for themselves. So now let's turn back and let's cover some things you do want to try. So one very effective way to create a caring climate is to strive for what we call using a 5-to-1 ratio of positive to negative interactions with your child. That's 5 positives for every time you have to create some kind of boundary or limit. It's interesting because research has been done on families and couples and classrooms and even business organizations, and the same findings come up again and again. If you want to bring out the best in others, it's important to put a lot of money, a lot of deposits into the emotional bank account of your relationship with them. In order to behave, your kids need to know that you care about them. Also, don't wait until they're misbehaving to give them attention. This actually makes things worse because if a child has a choice between being ignored or doing something good that pulls your attention to them, they'll do the acting out thing. So catch them being good. Here's a happy dad who learned how to use a 5-to-1 with his daughter. Another positive tool is a new and different kind of star chart that I talk about in my course. And one dad recently shared with me that his son got really excited about wanting to have a 5-star day. And the kid and his younger brother had had years and years of fighting and competing. But on this special day, the older brother was so proud to earn a star and let his little brother beat him running up the hill of their driveway in a foot race. So what a dramatic turnaround. So key number 4, strong-willed children are also best. They respond best to structure and consistency. In order to provide them with a safe container, they need healthy limits with age-appropriate consequences. And then under the conditions of being provided with caring and constructive limits, kids actually feel better about themselves. In every strong-willed child, there are really 2 competing parts. On one hand, your child's constantly trying to get the upper hand and sort of rule the world the way that they like it to be. There's the little king I showed you before. One kid said to me in a session, "Dr. Mack, the only problem is that my parents won't do what I tell them to." Well, the funny thing was this kid was serious. So that's one side of the coin. The other side of the coin is that when kids are getting away with too much, they feel anxious and scared about the power that they have. It can make them look like they're ADD or have ADD, even if they don't. That's because kids feel guilty about what they can get away with. And then they start feeling anxious. So it's so helpful to see kids' misbehavior as really a form of persistent testing to see where the limits are. When kids are out of control, they're begging you to provide some limits that can help them become successful and feel better about themselves. When parents are ready to make a shift in how they parent, one way of thinking about it is that the speed limit of what their child can get away with is going to be changing. The metaphor that I like to use is that instead of 90 miles an hour, the new speed limit's going to be 65. Okay, now I'm going to throw some more concepts out at you. So if we generalize here, there really are 2 extremes you want to avoid, 2 major mistakes that you can make as a parent, and one is to be too strict, and the other is to be too permissive. And as is true for many psychological issues, what tends to be best is balance and moderation. That's what we're looking for. So some parents get stuck in a dynamic where one parent is too permissive, and then guess what? The other parent will compensate by being too strict, or vice versa. So who's at fault? Well, fault isn't really the issue. The real question is whether you can change your own patterns and pull out of the destructive dynamic of compensating for each other and come to the middle. Both of you lose, and so does your child if you don't change that dynamic. So the goal for 2 parents is to be co-captains of the same team and hopefully heading in the same direction. So lots of times I tell parents, hey, you got to get your own act together before you take it on the road. And what I'm talking about here is for you to be able to communicate effectively with your parenting partner if you have one. You may have some disagreements that aren't all that significant, and that's cool, but if there are constant levels of tension, this obviously affects your child in a serious manner. Your relationship doesn't have to look like this all the time, but the major point is that it can't look like this or this. Because then you wind up with reactions like this. And as we know, that's not so fun. So as parents, you might want to sit down and see if you can come up with some rules for the family, and what are your do's and don'ts, and what are reasonable expectations for your child at their age and with their particular temperament. There's a good reason for laying rules out ahead of time before confrontations happen, and certainly not in the middle of an upset. Remember that when our brains are emotionally aroused, it's difficult, if not impossible, to think clearly or learn much. Here's a good one. This little girl says to her parents, "How am I supposed to think about consequences before they happen?" So the point is that kids need to know the rules and have consistent consequences to reduce confusion. When things aren't clear, there's no doubt that strong-willed kids will constantly test those limits to see where the boundaries are. Another challenge for some parents is that their mood, what we call their emotional temperature, makes too much of a difference in what they tolerate. You might want to avoid variations of the rules depending on whether you're stressed out or had a great day, It's very confusing and not so fair to kids. So as a final element of key number 4, I'm going to answer that question I posed to you a while back. You've been waiting long enough. Remember that question? It was, what's the really important thing that I always ask parents in a first session? The one that can be fairly simple to implement, but can make a big difference. Got your answer? Ready? Drum roll, please. Well, it's all about sleep. It's a big slice of the pie of influences that we talked about before. So what we know from sleep research is that most American kids and adults are being sleep deprived, and sleep is hugely important as a means of giving kids the ability to be loving and more in control of their impulses and have an optimal chance to learn. When people don't have enough sleep, they become anxious and irritable, and with kids, as you probably know, it can totally make behavior problems worse. So here's the deal with sleep. Well, we know that the average teenager can stay up until midnight finishing a term paper or texting their friends on a Thursday night, but then they have the ability to sleep in until noon or even 2 p.m. on a Saturday afternoon. Same with adults. They can sleep in and make up sleep debt to some degree. But it's not so with young kids. What we know is that children in the 4 to 12 age range who are no longer napping, and all the way up until puberty, they can't sleep in and catch up on sleep. So they're bound to be irritable when they're constantly woken up in the morning. For example, if you let your child stay up until 11 on a Friday night, you know what? They're going to wake up pretty much at the same time, usually no later than 7:30 or 8 the next morning. So bottom line is, if you have to wake up your child to get up in the morning, then they're not getting enough sleep. So here's the simple question I ask parents before the end of every first session. Do you have to wake up your child for school in the morning? What percentage of the time do you have to do that? And by wake up, I mean either by your physical presence or the dog licking them or their brother waking them up, or some parents even give their kids alarm clocks. And to be honest with you, if I ruled the world, I'd ban the darn things. There are some things in the world that you can do too much of. You can eat too much, you can exercise too much, but you can't ever sleep too much. When you've got enough sleep, you just wake up without being woken up. No matter whether a kid's referred to me for anxiety or fears or behavior or emotional problems, any of these challenging behaviors improve from a change in sleep patterns. Sleep is what really turns the brain on and helps us to function optimally. And I heard from a sleep expert the other day that they've even figured out that the brain shrinks in the skull every night, providing an opportunity for the flushing out of dead nerve cells and toxins. So a lack of sleep makes everything harder for kids. It's harder for them to moderate their negative emotions, harder to focus, harder to do homework, harder to cope with everyday stress, no matter what it is. And one final recommendation I'd like to make with sleep is that if you want your child to go to sleep more quickly and get some good rest, it works so well if you can take anywhere between 10 and 15 minutes each evening to snuggle, read with them, rub their back, sing, say a prayer, whatever. Even if your child's had a really, really bad day and has been testing you a lot, this is a time to communicate your unconditional love for them and have special bonding. Think of it also as a window of opportunity to have them share their feelings or ask questions or process their day. Finally, as a part of that process, while lying with them, just before lights are out and maybe even after, just slow, deep breathe yourself. It helps their little brains sink to yours and settle them down. It can really help you to chill out too. So, speaking of chilling out, I hope that this hasn't been all too overwhelming to you. Some people hear about all these complexities and they get overloaded and overwhelmed. But in the course that I offer, I take you step by step through some tried and true new ideas. And this program is designed to be brief and to the point, even suitable for dads and parents feeling overwhelmed and burned out and don't have enough time, particularly for all of you who already have a lot on your plate and are doing that incredible, impossible balancing act between work and home demands. So you as a parent have a strong-willed child, and that's a blessing, and it's also a challenge. And if you're typical, this is how you like your family to be, and how sweet is this? And things will never be perfect like this all the time, but if this is how you'd like to feel more of the time with your child, but instead you're starting to feel a little scared about what's happening at home, and maybe your house can be like the Johnson's house sometimes with sparks are flying. And if you've tried tons of different approaches but nothing seems to work, well then you've come to the right place. So let's kick open the door and see some important things you'll learn if you take the course that I'm offering. The big overall theme is that you're going to learn reasons why your child isn't listening and what you can do about it. Remember back to when I talked about how it really helps to figure out not one, but all of the different pieces of the puzzle that can explain why your child is defiant or isn't listening so well. So we're going to figure that out, and you can learn some tools to turn things around. So how are we going to accomplish all these things? Well, here's the 7 modules that we'll travel through. In Module 1, we're going to talk about the essential elements of the win-win way and why spanking and yelling and repeating yourself don't work so well. We'll also talk about issues related to kids who may be acting up in school or not. You'll also hear some really important principles related to the latest brain research and the discovery of what we call mirror neurons. Module 2 focuses on handling family feelings, particularly with what I call big feelings. You'll be learning tons of tools to handle your child's and your own anger and upsets in more constructive ways. In Module 3, we talk about creating the foundation for harmony through teamwork and rules and roles. We'll also be scoring your family assessments so you can see your strengths and have a clearer picture of areas needing attention. This is where we talk about building the parenting team and making sure you're on the same page. We'll also shed light on any reasons why it may be hard for you to set limits and how to move through those blocks. There may be influences that prevent you from being effective. As an example, feelings from your own childhood can also too easily be activated or played out when we become parents. It's a pain in the butt when these nasty little skeletons pop up, but you too can gain some new insights and grow from them and become even stronger and more at peace with yourself. In Module 4, we'll talk about the 5-to-1 ratio and the various forms of praise that can have very different results. Some forms of praise are great and some aren't so helpful. You'll also learn to use a unique form of star chart that includes a really playful form of reverse psychology and encourages kids to pick up the ball and run with it. I'm telling you, they love it. In Module 5, we talk about caring and effective consequences that kids actually like. So, with strong-willed kids, caring and kindness is totally necessary, but unfortunately, in most cases, it's not enough. Module 5 describes a powerful means of giving kids a new form of timeout that they really prefer, and that you're more likely to use this technique, and it also has the side benefit of teaching your child the skill of what we call emotional self-regulation, the ability to control feelings rather than acting out. Then a finer major component is the use of a backup to timeout when kids are so out of control that they won't respond to your limits. And this module will also includes video demonstrations of these procedures. Module 6 explains the launching of the new game plan with a family meeting, and we'll talk about the timing of your transition from the way you've been doing things to the new way, what we call the new blueprint. It's really important to turning things around and the attitude with which you introduce and explain things to your child, creating a context of fun and humor and warmth and working together as a team. The final module, Module 7, will help you with some of the most common challenges to implementing and following through with things, and what are your roadblocks, and also what's unique about 3 to 10-year-olds. And what about special issues with step families and alternative families and single parent families? What about sibling issues? And I would wager that probably none of you have any challenges with setting limits of screen time, right? So each of these modules have instructional videos that are ready for action. And if some of you are too busy or overwhelmed to sit down and watch the videos, there's also some audio versions. Maybe you'd rather soak it up on a commute. You'll be missing some really cool slides, but I wanted to give you this convenient option if you want it. And here are the kinds of shifts you can look forward to. You're going to have a simple and effective plan of action, maybe some greater harmony, knowing how to use your child's strong-willed nature as an asset rather than as a liability, and to be able to get on the same page with your partner. And your child can also shift to becoming more respectful and listening better and feeling more appreciated and valued. You know, folks ask me a lot why the heck this program works so well. So one reason is that I've spent decades integrating a variety of ideas. And I'm going to be honest with you guys. It breaks my heart to see the suffering that families are going through. And the hardest part about it for me is that so much of this pain is unnecessary. There's enough challenge and strife in the world that can't be avoided. So why not give yourself the gift of at least tackling the things you can change in life? I've also got to honestly and humbly say that another reason is that this win-win way of parenting has really been enhanced and refined by the feedback and follow-up that I continue to get from the countless numbers of families that I've helped. So it's not just my thing, it's our thing. A third reason is that you'll learn to provide incentives and consequences that increase your child's motivation. And right now, one of the ruts you've gotten stuck in is that you care a lot about how your child's behaving, but they don't care so much. So through a dramatic shift, starting with the rollout of your new program in a family meeting, this pattern and dynamic can get reversed. And I'll show you how to do it. One bonus for signing up for the course is an audio-visual presentation that Deborah and I put together called What Every Couple Should Know. And what are the most common themes that couples present? And what are some simple and effective tools to use to enhance your relationship? Some couples just aren't feeling connected enough to work as a parenting team, and this extra module can give you some really effective tools to resolve conflict and build your parenting team and get on the same page. Yet another bonus is the latest thinking from 3 of my most esteemed colleagues and prominent clinicians in the country. You'll be able to hear me interview psychologist Ron Taffel, who's written 7 best-selling parenting books and has done over 1,000 consultations and workshops internationally. And among other things, Ron and I talk a lot about how to handle the issue of screen time. A second interview is with child psychiatrist Scott Shannon, who's been a key figure in the creation of holistic and integrative perspectives in psychiatry for decades now. And Scott and I focus on alternatives to medication, including the use of supplements for helping kids with ADD. Last but not least is my interview with my wife, Deborah, and she's easily the best clinician I know, and she's going to focus on the keys to happy, healthy families, particularly as it pertains to parenting strong-willed kids. So at this point, you may be saying to yourself, so Dr. Mack, you're thinking this is such a great program. Well, what is it, the key to world peace? And I got to say no. I'm not going to win the Nobel Peace Prize anytime soon. But it is a collection of innovative concepts and tools and practices that can almost certainly help you to create more peace and harmony in your world, your family. It's a win-win solution that helps the whole family run more smoothly, including your child's relationship to their siblings. You'll be setting limits, and your child will love you even more so for doing that. I hear it all the time. And parents constantly tell me how when things have settled down, they feel so much better about their children again. Now, I want to make it clear. I would never want your child to be like this. In fact, I'd really be concerned if they acted like this. But the point is, not this. And if you ask your child to clean up their room. There really shouldn't be a lot of arguments. Same thing with taking a break from electronic games. And as far as I'm concerned, there really is only one valid excuse for your child's not brushing their teeth when you ask them to. And here it is. Look, Daddy, I can't brush my teeth. What this course offers is an effective method of turning things around. The goal is simple, to help kids feel good about themselves and have love and respect for others. For kids who have too much power in the family, it's not only tough on you, but your child's missing out because they're not getting fundamental lessons in life that they need to survive in a world that won't always revolve around them. Finally, for you as a parent, what's true about strong-willed kids is that they can bring up all kinds of personal challenges for us, what I call lessons, despite what a pain in the butt it can be sometimes. So I might ask you, what's the gift that your strong-willed child brings to you? What is it that you're supposed to be learning in life? Is it how to be patient or present? Is it how to learn to deal with big feelings? I love this one. Before I tell you what happened, Mom, remember, the Lord, or life, will never give you more than you can handle. And please understand that one of the most important gifts that you can give your child is the gift of a healthy relationship that you have with yourself. And if you have a partner, then it's with them as well. So find that fine balance where your child's still hugely important to you, but that you also have a life and know how to take care of yourself. Your child needs to know that they're important, yet they shouldn't really be an all-consuming concern to you and the center of your universe. So in closing, it doesn't really matter what size or shape your 3 to 10-year-old child is or what their particular temperament or challenges might be, whether you're married, a single parent, gay couple, blended family, or a grandparent that's significantly involved. You've come to the right place. And I wanted to make this whole thing super affordable to you. So, working with a therapist involves scheduling and timing and travel and can cost thousands of dollars. But the price of this course I'm offering is only $97. And that includes all of the bonuses I laid out. I know that for all of their wonderful attributes, strong-willed kids can be so hard to handle. I know because I've been there in the trenches helping so many families. And I hope I can be there for you too. So hang in there, you can do it. You're just a number of steps away. It's just a matter of figuring out the pieces to your puzzle and putting them together. And after you sign up, you'll get immediate access to the entire course. And for those of you who want additional support or have questions, I'll be available to you live online to provide group coaching with a Q&A format. So this is the end of the webinar now, but hopefully the start of a new relationship where we can work together and bring greater harmony into your life. If it feels right for you, please sign up and see the kind of difference you can make in your family. Just go to strongwilledchild.com/course and you'll find a ton of information that can help you to make this important decision. Okay. Well, thank you so much. And now I'll be sticking around to take your questions about some things we've covered today or questions about the course. So let's talk. So I see one question here that asks about whether the program is suitable for kids with ADD. And here's another related one about kids with anxiety. So what I can tell you is that it really helps all kids who are strong-willed or kids who have a hard time listening, regardless of whatever symptoms they have. I shared with you guys before how I get a bunch of referrals from physicians, and a typical question that's posed is whether or not a kid has ADD. Should the doc put them on meds, in other words? And in my experience, kids can really look ADD, like I said in the webinar, when they're not, even though they're not, because it's so hard for them to focus and stop bouncing off the walls when they don't have consistent and appropriate limits and boundaries. So tons of kids, and most in my experience, really don't need meds. They just need more structure and consistency. So that's where it's really helpful to put your attention first. Same thing with anxiety. I do treat a lot of kids with anxiety. It's a very common dilemma these days, a common trait presented to me. But before I give kids tools like cognitive tools, which are the treatment of choice, I want to make sure that the family is providing healthy boundaries, that their anxiety isn't created by the anxiety in the family, that kind of thing. Okay, here's a funny question. What's the catch, Dr. Mack? Why is this course so inexpensive? Well, thanks for asking that. So a lot of families that I treat really need this kind of help. They really can't afford it, and you'll remember that my mission in life is to see what I can do to make a difference in the world and serve people. It really pains me, like I said, to see unnecessary suffering, because whether it's in my office or seeing kids with their parents or chasing their children around restaurants, we all need some healing. And if we turned the tables around and you had an antibiotic and I had an infection, I imagine that you too would offer me that medicine without charging me an arm and a leg. So one more thing here. Oh, it's not a question, it's a comment. Thank you so much, Dr. Mack. I really enjoyed your presentation. So, all right, I guess that's it for now. And thanks again. Just make sure you go to strongwilledchild.com/course. And for all of you who were unbelievably patient and persistent enough to stay till the very end, please help yourself and download 2 albums of award-winning songs at happykidsongs.com/bonus. Take care.